Hi, welcome back to another episode of Road to Damascus. Today, I want to look at a very interesting topic in early church history, and it's called the Pentarchy. Now, what is the Pentarchy, you may ask? So, the Pentarchy refers to the five original centers of power or authority. Authority is a better word to use in this case. The five original centers of authority in the early Christian church. So these were places around the world that held like a higher status of authority in the early Christian church. So there were places people would go to settle doctrinal disputes, for example, or places that whose leaders sort of gave directions and directions and advice to other people or other Christians that were serving within the regions that they held primacy from. So what were these centers of authority? So they were also known as the Patriarchates, the five Patriarchates. And one of them was Rome. So the Patriarchate of Rome is part of the original Pentarchy. So the Patriarchate of Rome is essentially the Christian church that existed in Rome. And the Bishop of Rome later became what is known as the Pope officially. So Rome was a huge center of authority in the early Christian church, and it's easy to understand why, because Rome was at the center of the Roman Empire at the time, and also it was the seat of St. Peter. So the church in Rome was believed to have been founded by Peter, and Peter was his first bishop, and so the leader of the church in Rome was considered as somebody who was succeeding Peter, right? So later on, the Bishop of Rome claimed a stronger sense of authority over all Christians because he's believed to be a spiritual successor of St. Peter, and it was on St. Peter that Jesus said he was going to build his church, right? So that's the Patriarchate of Rome, or the seat of authority in the early Christian world that was within the city of Rome. Then the other Patriarchate was the Patriarchate of Constantinople. So we know that the east and western part of the Roman Empire split, and the Constantinople had become the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, and the bishop of Constantinople was also like a huge figure in the early Christian church, right? So it was the Bishop of Constantinople that handled most of the other smaller, let's say, churches within the Eastern Roman Empire at the time. And his office became extremely important, and it became the center of authority in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Now, the next Patriarchate is the Patriarchate of Alexandria. So Alexandria is located in present-day Egypt, and this sort of early Christian church is believed to have been founded by Saint Mark the Evangelist. So Alexandria, which also had the one of the probably the biggest library in the ancient church, in the ancient world at the time, was believed to be a huge center of theology, right? And like study, deep study of theology and discussion within the church. So the leader of the Alexandria church was also a huge figure in the early Christian world. And later down the line, the church in Alexandria sort of split into the Coptic and the Greek Orthodox churches as well. And we will look at later in a different video the various schisms and how they brought like divisions within the Christian world. Now we also have the Patriarchate of Antioch. So Antioch is located in present-day Turkey, and it was essentially the first place that the followers of Christ became known as Christians, and is believed to have been also associated with Peter and also Paul. So it was like Antioch was a place where the name Christians, or the term Christians, was first used to describe the followers of Christ. And on that basis, it's probably the earliest sites or the earliest place where Christians, the term Christians was used, and the people that were worshiping or following this new religion that had emerged at the time were called Christians. So it really became a huge center of importance in the early Christian world. So the leaders of the church in Antioch were also held really to a huge esteem, and so they had a lot of authority in the early Christian church. And finally, we have the Patriarch of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem needs no reason why it was considered important, right? So it was the site of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, and the church there held a lot of primacy because of its spiritual connection to Jesus and the life and ministry of Jesus. So the bishop of the church in Jerusalem was also considered the patriarch of the church. So there were these 5 patriarchates whose bishops were called patriarchs of the church, and they were considered extremely important, and their advice and their direction was considered extremely important in the early Christian church. So this is what we mean by the Pentarchy. So if you're ever in a discussion with somebody and the person mentions, have you heard of the term Pentarchy? Now you know what the Pentarchy means. Essentially refers to the 5 patriarchates of the early Christian church, and whose leaders or whose bishops were known as patriarchs, and they were the centers of authority in the early Christian church. Now, as you can see, there's a slight distinction in the sense that the Patriarch of Rome, or the Bishop of Rome, who later which later evolved to the office of the Pope, considered himself first amongst equals, right? So, and the reason why he considered himself first amongst equals was that the Bishop of Rome considered himself the spiritual successor of Peter, right? So, if you know, when a new pope is installed, it's like they will say the pope is come to take over the throne of St. Peter, right? So the Bishop of Rome somewhat still considered himself as the real spiritual leader of all Christians, because it was on St. Peter that Jesus said he was going to build his church. And so yeah, that's the Pentarchy, the 5 original patriarchates. And also one thing to note is that after the Arab and Muslim conquest of most of the Eastern Roman Empire and also North Africa, 4 of those patriarchates fell under Muslim control or Muslim administration. So Antioch, Jerusalem, Alexandria, Constantinople, they all fell under Muslim authority or control, but they still existed as Christian sites, Christian churches, etc. And then it was only Rome that still has continuously stayed under Christian control after it was founded, or as it evolved. So yeah. That is it. This is a quick episode on what the Pentarchy is, and now you know what the Pentarchy is. You know what the 5 original patriarchates were and what were their significance in the ancient Christian church. Thank you very much, and please subscribe and like and share this video to others so that they can also benefit.